Yes, thank you, Lorraine, for setting us off to a good start. And a very warm good morning to all of us. Good morning. So let me start first by saying thank you very much for honoring our invitation. We typically don't hold events on Monday because you're coming off a very busy weekend, and so you're looking to go straight into the office and start off the week. But we were keen to convene because we have quite a number of important agendas that we are driving with the Global Compact participants here in Kenya, and the days are fast catching up with us, so we are trying to also maximize on every available opportunity we have. So I really thank you for making time to be here with us on this Monday morning as we kick off a new week. So allow me to start first by acknowledging the presence of the Principal Secretary. She will be with us in a short while. Principal Secretary, Justice, Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs, Office of the Attorney General, Honorable Judith Pareno. We also have in the room the Country Representative, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Charles Kwemoi. To all of you, our distinguished guests, participants of the UN Global Compact, we welcome you to this workshop. So on behalf of the Global Compact and the partners, it is our pleasure to welcome you to this workshop on business and human rights. In the room you've heard, we have representation from government, majority of you from the private sector. We also have in the room development partners who have all come together for a simple reason. And the reason is we are beginning to see the way expectations on business and how they treat people are increasingly becoming important. And many of us are having to examine a lot of our policies and systems to meet these expectations that many of our stakeholders have. And so we have dedicated this day to understand these shifts and what they mean for all of you businesses in practice and for all companies operating here in Kenya. Now, for a long time, business and human rights has been treated as a voluntary, good to have agenda. But we are understanding that this is no longer the case. Respect for human rights now influences who gets access to what markets, which suppliers or markets are considered low risk, and how investors assess long-term value and resilience. So the questions for the companies have changed. It is no longer, should we do this, or are we ready, or where do we start? And so many of you here are participants of the UN Global Compact, and as you already know, it is a special initiative of the UN Secretary General with a vision to mobilize business to transform sustainability ambition into action at the scale the world demands. So we have more than 25,000 signatories across the globe in over 100 countries. And here in Kenya, we happen to host the largest footprint of UN Global Compact signatories in Africa as well as the Middle East region. So 300 strong businesses have signed up to our principles to advance business respect for human rights, labor rights, advance environmental stewardship, as well as work collectively to end corruption in Kenya. So the UN Global Compact, as you know, is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, working to bring the collective voice and impact of the business community to advance our sustainable development agenda. And so through the Global Compact Network Kenya, which is the host for this meeting, we are working with all of you to translate frameworks like the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and Kenya's National Action Plan into decisions that both boards, CEOs, managers can implement and can actually drive impact around. Now, you'll hear from the presentations later this morning that Kenya has already taken important steps. We have the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, the NAP, that gives us the national framework and has raised awareness across sectors. But many businesses, and I'm sure many of you in the room still have questions. And some of the questions you might be wanting to ask and want answers to is, what do the UN Guiding Principles really require from you? And how do you reflect them in your governance, risk, and supply chain decisions? And you might also want to understand what are the buyers, regulators, and investors actually looking for. Because these discussions have since shifted from a good to have, a question of morality, to actually a question of how you actually access business and compete in this environment. And so the workshop is designed to address this and many more questions in a practical way without legal and technical overload. At the same time, we're looking for leadership. Leadership on business and human rights is not about achieving perfect scores. Rather, it's about understanding where the greatest risks to people lie, ensuring clear accountability at senior management and board level, and putting in place practical due diligence measures while strengthening them over time and remaining open to engagement and providing remedy when things go wrong. And we're not here to judge either. We're not here to assess where companies are, but we're here to help you move one step closer from where you are today. For companies and for businesses out here that think that business and human rights and their respect for rights in how they operate and run their business that is no longer important, we now see that it carries great risk. It's a risk for how you access contracts, it's a risk to your reputation, and also your ability to attract finance. But there's also an opportunity. Companies that act early often face fewer surprises when regulations or buyer standards tighten or shift. They also have the opportunity to build stronger trust with workers, communities, and regulators, and they're better positioned to compete in demanding value chains. So human rights are therefore not an extra. It is part of running a resilient and future-fit business. And so it's our hope that by the end of today, you will have a clearer, plain language understanding of the UN guiding principles, or the UNGPs, as you'll keep hearing them being called, how Kenya's National Action Plan relates to your role as a business. You'll also become more aware of emerging ESG and due diligence expectations in key markets. And I've had some of you come from the agricultural sector, and so you're already seeing the expectations, especially in terms of market access for some of the countries and regions where you're trying to access or to send over your goods. And so it's important that we begin to be market ready as well as partner ready as we delve into these issues. And we also hope, as we have discussed as part of the expectations, that you will be able to identify at least 2 to 3 practical entry points that you can take back to your organization. So think of this as a working session. The value will come from the questions you ask, your examples, and your willingness to test ideas against your own reality. So we hope that today will be a shift from what this is about, what this means for us as a business. We hope this will also be a shift from broad commitments to concrete first steps, and from working in isolation to learning together with peers and partners. And so for us at the Global Compact, together with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, we are committed to supporting you beyond this room with tools, peer learning platforms, and continued dialogue. And we thank you also for the commitments that you have made this far. And as we also begin to, of course, move into the ambition and the direction of transparency and accountability for a lot of the commitments that UN Global Compact participants have made, we are hoping that we'll be able to see more elaboration of how the companies in the room are translating the business respect for human rights. I think somebody mentioned earlier that they're also looking to see how this workshop can prepare them for the next reporting cycle. And what is coming out, and we find it an issue of interest at the Global Compact as we look at the results of our report for 2025, is we have majority of the companies in the room and those within the UN Global Compact participant base reporting largely on the environmental pillar. So we are not seeing a lot of disclosures on human rights, labor rights, which also brings into question what our understanding is in terms of our responsibilities to people. So everybody is doing something on environment, which is good, but that's not all that we are supposed to do as part of our commitments to ESG. So let's see how we can elevate the social as well as the governance pillar, which are also critically important for our sector and our country here in Kenya. I think on the environment side, and we look at issues climate action, Kenya is on the receiving end when it comes to a lot of the adverse impacts of this changing environment, but we are not largely responsible for what is happening. But at the same time, we can see the vast majority of the impacts on people, a lot of those are not being addressed, they're not being talked about. And so you'll see us partnering a bit more with government, with the development partners, to help you really understand the commitments as well as the responsibilities on the S and the G going forward. So we commend you for the work on the E, but a lot more work needs to be done on human rights, social issues around your labor impacts, and as well as on issues corruption. So we look forward to this workshop being one of the stepping stones to help us bring us closer to getting us to drive impacts on this area. And we ask you to engage with us openly if there are challenges or if there are obstacles along the way that you're facing as companies in the room or as a collective. Let us know so that we can be able to identify those and help you all be able to build out robust environment, social, and governance impacts. So we look forward to the session, and we thank our partners who are in the room, and we look forward to, of course, deeper collaboration in advancing business and human rights in Kenya. And thank you all for your attention.
My name is Charles Kwemoy. I work for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights as a country representative for Kenya. I think that for those of you who have heard about the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, we now implement the full mandate of the High Commissioner in Kenya. Before last year, our mandate was not fully fledged. We were operating as an armpit of the resident coordinator of Kenya. And over time, the evolution of our work and our engagements here have required that we expand and strengthen our work in Kenya. I am honored to welcome you to this session or to this workshop on understanding business and human rights frameworks and the legislative landscape convened by our office, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in partnership with the Global Compact Kenya. Let me begin by thanking all of you for making the time to attend this forum. And I listened to all of you during the introductions very, very attentively. And I find it extremely appropriate that we are here this morning listening to the interests and the expectations from all of you. Your presence here signals something important, that business and human rights is no longer a peripheral issue, but one that sits at the heart of how responsible and competitive businesses operate today. And Judy has highlighted very, very clearly that in the days that are coming, human rights and the guiding principles are going to be one of the critical parameters for successful businesses in the future because of the evolution of how things go. Kenya has demonstrated leadership on the agenda. The adoption of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights was a significant milestone, not only for the country, but for the region. It reflects a clear recognition that sustainable economic development must go hand in hand with respect for human rights. Just before we came in here, I was having a chat with Julie, and I did reiterate what I said in another conference last week on Friday, the Human Rights Defenders Awards, that Kenya remains a trailblazer, a pacesetter in the region, in many things, in many areas. And this is the interest, and this is also the reason why our office is here, to make sure that that role that Kenya plays in this region continues to be supported, and that it continues, to remain as it is. However, as we all know, frameworks and commitments are only the starting point. You know that Kenya has done a lot in terms of regulatory frameworks. We now have an action plan on business and human rights. But these frameworks and commitments are only the starting point. What we are seeing globally and increasingly within Kenya is a shift from awareness to expectation, from voluntary commitments to regulatory and market-driven requirements, from statements of intent to demonstrable action. And that is why the Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, which is championed obviously by the Office of the Attorney General, is a critical tool to bring these commitments into concrete deliverables for the people of Kenya. Human rights due diligence is increasingly shaping participation in global value chains and in several key export markets. It is becoming a condition for market access. This shift is reflected in investor decision-making processes and in growing buyer scrutiny of supply chains, labor practices, and human rights risk management systems. And that is why I think when Julie was saying there is a lot of concentration on reporting around environment and engagements around environment, we still need to do a lot in trying to look at other areas. Because responsible business practices that we are going to be emphasizing throughout this workshop are also very, very critical in accelerating what we now call accelerating the sustainable development goals. In this evolving landscape, the question is no longer whether businesses should engage with human rights, but how will those businesses engage with human rights? How do the United Nations guiding principles of business and human rights translate into day-to-day business decisions and operations? What does Kenya's National Action Plan mean in practice for companies? How should businesses position themselves and operate in anticipation of emerging regulatory requirements and investor expectations? I am hoping that some of these critical questions will be answered during the sessions that will run through today. These are not abstract questions, though. They go directly to the issues of competitiveness, of resilience, and long-term value of the businesses that you are all engaged in. At OHCHR, through the Business and Human Rights Africa project, we have been working with governments, national institutions, businesses, human rights defenders, and others from civil society across the region to support the practical implementation of the UN guiding principles. One consistent insight has emerged. Businesses are willing to engage, but they need clarity, relevance, practical entry points, and support, including from government, civil society, and other stakeholders. And that is why I still think that really the Global Compact Network, which as I understand is the biggest in the region, is extremely at the center of this with an important role in pushing this forward. Today's session is designed to respond to the need. It is not intended to be overly technical, rather it aims to provide a clear and accessible understanding of the frameworks, the policy landscape, stakeholder engagement, and most importantly, what this means for your businesses in practice. So we will be looking at those regulatory frameworks. I think what will be very important for you is to explore how these frameworks apply directly to the businesses that you are involved in. I would like to emphasize that business and human rights is not about adding another layer of compliance. It's about the strategic framework to strengthen how businesses identify, prevent, mitigate, and address adverse human rights and environmental impacts on people linked to their operations, products, services, and value chains. It's about building trust between employees, communities, and consumers, and ultimately it's about positioning businesses to succeed in a rapidly changing global economy. Just about 2 weeks ago, we were in Nakuru, where the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights was releasing a report on the impact of businesses on the indigenous peoples, and quite a lot of recommendations that were advanced to take that forward. Some of those recommendations, if you look at the report that was launched, are around how do we move these things forward to ensure that business corporates and the activities of their business respond to some of the issues that impact on people. Because putting people at the center is what the SDGs aspire for, is what the whole Global Compact is about. We therefore encourage you to engage actively throughout today's discussions and ask questions, share experiences, and reflect on how these issues connect to own operations and strategic priorities. Finally, let me thank our partners at the Global Compact Network Kenya for their collaboration, and all speakers and participants for contributing to this important dialogue. We look forward to a very productive and engaging session throughout the day, and I hope that out of it we should have more clarity on how we can continue to engage on the issues that impact on the people, on the issues that impact on human rights arising from the activities that all your organizations or companies are engaged in. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much. A round of applause. I would want to invite the Executive Director of Global Compact Network Kenya to invite our keynote.
Thank you, Lorraine, and thank you, Alex, for also sharing with us perspectives from DI and the implications for market access arising from a lot of these regulatory developments. And I think the businesses in the room have been able to take note that this evolving environment is continuously placing demands on the private sector, not just the key sectors that we've touched on agriculture or the export-facing ones. So we all need to pay attention and be better prepared for what's coming ahead. And so now I have the distinct pleasure to, of course, acknowledge the presence of our Principal Secretary, Honorable Judith Pareno, from the Department for Justice, Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs from the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice. Honorable PS is one Principal Secretary who I like to say embodies the principles of open government. She has been a great supporter of the work that we are doing to advance business respect for human rights. And she's really been open to engage with us, and particularly the private sector within the platforms of the Global Compact. And when we convene and when we call upon her, she has always made the point to come and, of course, be with us, dialogue with us, and also explore with us how we can, of course, partner with her office to advance this very important agenda. And so we have the pleasure to have her in the room with us today, but also hear from her what her department has to offer in terms of even partnerships together with the private sector to advance respect for human rights, so that collectively we can also put Kenya on a path of not only development, but inclusive development that also meets the aspirations of the Kenyan people. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite you, Honorable PS, to address the people. In the room we have private sector players. These are largely participants from the UN Global Compact membership or signatories who've made a commitment to advance human rights as guided by the 10 principles of the Global Compact. They are businesses that represent all sectors of Kenya's economy, from financial services, ICT, agriculture, you name it, they are all here. And I think they've been paying attention and trying to understand what role they can play as individual businesses, but also collectively as private sector here in Kenya. So Madam PS, please address your people.
Good afternoon. My name is Judith Pareno, the PS for Justice, Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs under the Office of the Attorney General. I am happy to be here. Actually, I felt good because I think this is where we started with you. Some time back when I took office as PS, I had a breakfast meeting here with partners and foundations and embassies and people of goodwill. And at that time, I was introducing myself and also introducing the mandate of the State Department for Justice. And I'm happy that I'm back here because those that I met that day have gone on in partnership with us. They have been able to engage us. We've been able to engage them in one way or another. And I'm happy that we are moving on. So all protocols observed, because I'm told we have a business community here, we have Global Compact. I am happy to be with you. So distinguished guests, partners, members of the private sector, colleagues from the United Nations and all stakeholders, it is my great honor to join you for this important conversation on business and human rights. I thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Global Compact Network Kenya for convening this timely session. The State Department for Justice and Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs bears a broad mandate that directly supports today's conversation and responsible business conduct. We coordinate national efforts on constitutional implementation, human rights compliance, governance reforms, access to justice and anti-corruption frameworks. Importantly, we oversee the National Legal Aid Service, the Victim Protection Framework, and the promotion of the rule of law across institutions. These functions align closely with the expectations of the business and human rights agenda, particularly in ensuring that the state meets its duty to provide a predictable regulatory environment and strengthen institutions that enable companies to operate responsibly. Today's dialogue reinforces this mandate by encouraging stronger collaboration between state, business, and communities in building a fair, transparent, and right-respecting economy. Ladies and gentlemen, today we meet at a moment both to reflection and anticipation. Over the past decade, Kenya has made steady progress in shaping a responsible business environment. Our journey began with a bold step, and I'm proud to recall that Kenya was the first country in Africa to develop a national action plan on business and human rights. Since then, 4 other countries on the continent have followed this example: Uganda, Nigeria, Liberia, and Ghana. This leadership placed Kenya at the forefront of conversations on corporate responsibility and accountability. The National Action Plan became a powerful conversation starter in the country. It opened a much-needed space for dialogue between government, business, civil society, workers, and communities. It clarified the responsibility of companies under the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and brought coherence to a subject that was previously seen as voluntary or peripheral. Most importantly, the National Action Plan made it clear that respect for human rights is a core component of governance, competitiveness, and long-term business success. As we approach the end of the current National Action Plan cycle, we must take stock of our progress, the lessons learned, and what the next chapter of our national agenda should look like. One key lesson is that businesses need practical tools, not only principles, to translate commitments into day-to-day action. It is for this reason that the State Department for Justice, Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs, in close partnership with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, developed 2 landmark tools for the private sector. These are the Human Rights Due Diligence Framework and the Model Operational Level Grievance Mechanism that were officially launched last week. We were here to launch them again last week, somewhere in Westlands. These tools are designed to give companies clear, practical guidance on how to identify, prevent, and address human rights risks, how to strengthen internal governance, how to ensure accessibility and fairness when grievances arise, and how to build trust with workers, communities, and business partners. They reflect a critical shift taking place globally. Around the world, we see a move from voluntary action to regulatory expectation. In Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and other emerging rules are reshaping global value chains. The EU Deforestation Regulation, for example, is already affecting Kenyan exports, particularly in sectors such as coffee, where traceability, land use governance, and environmental compliance are becoming decisive factors for market access. Ladies and gentlemen, this tells us one thing. The global landscape is shifting quickly. Compliance expectations are rising. Buyers, investors, and regulators want strong evidence of responsible business conduct. Companies that anticipate this expectation will secure better market opportunities, protect their reputation, and strengthen resilience. Those that delay risk being locked out of supply chains. For Kenyan businesses, the question is not whether these expectations will reach us, but how prepared we are when they do. This is why today's engagement is so important. It is an opportunity to strengthen understanding, to exchange experiences across sectors, and to position Kenyan companies to stay ahead of the curve. At the same time, as we respond to global changes, it is essential that we shape this conversation through the lens of Africa's and Kenya's unique realities. Let us apply it to ourselves. Our economy, supply chains, and governance structures are different. Our labor markets are different. Our communities and social dynamics are different. We must ensure that international frameworks are interpreted in a way that respects local contexts while upholding universal human rights. This balance is important. It ensures that compliance does not become a burden, but an opportunity to strengthen competitiveness, deepen stakeholders' trust, and increase long-term value. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight an important national reform currently underway, the rollout underway by us, the Office of the Attorney General and State Department of Justice. The rollout of the legal aid service across all 47 counties. Through the National Legal Aid Service, the government has already deployed 98 state councils and established a functional legal aid center in Nairobi. We've already done pioneering of Nairobi in Kibra, Machakos, and Kitui, where we have already pioneered and opened offices for legal aid. With each of these 47 counties having 2 state councils in the legal aid centers to help the needy to understand and access justice at the expense of government. This year, we commenced the scale-up of the remaining 42 counties, ensuring that every Kenyan has access to legal information, advice, and assistance regardless of geographical location or financial capacity. This investment is central to strengthening access to remedy, which is one of the pillars of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. A justice system that is accessible supports early disputes resolutions, enhances community trust, and contributes to a stable business environment that allows responsible enterprise to thrive. I urge the private sector to continue partnering with government and national institutions. I also encourage you to share your challenges openly so that we can refine our policies and look to a better support. We are committed to an approach that is collaborative, predictable, and grounded in evidence. I kept telling people that when I took off, I knew that there are no Kenyans that are private sector and Kenyans that are, we are all Kenyans. Whatever that affects Kenya affects all of us, irrespective of where you're practicing. And that is why I was telling the civil society, please join me to walk this justice path together, because there is no Kenya for civil society and Kenya for government. We have one Kenya and we need to look for each other. So let us collaborate and let us engage with each other. Let today's session deepen your understanding of the UN Guiding Principles, renew your commitment to responsible business conduct, and equip you with the clarity needed to respond to evolving market and regulatory demands. In closing, I want to emphasize that a strong and responsible business environment is essential for Kenya's progress. It's a post-investment, it strengthens governance, it promotes fairness and social stability, and ultimately, it helps us build an economy where growth goes hand in hand with dignity, justice, and respect for every person. I thank you for your presence, your commitment, and your leadership. I look forward to continued collaboration as we chart the next phase of Kenya's business and human rights agenda together. Thank you.
The National Action Plan provides that the state should review our trade agreements to ensure they are in line with the human rights standards. A lot of work is also happening just in the trade sector in and of itself. A policy has been developed, the National Trade Policy and the Consumer Protection Policy, and there's even a bill on matters trade.
Business is good because, of course, there's a lot of positive impacts that come with business, but we are saying that sometimes the impacts can be quite severe, and therefore we need some level of responsibility in human rights to be able to ensure that when things happen, then the impact is either prevented or reduced. Hapo tuko sawa, sivyo?
How do you make sure that you are not overburdening the people at the bottom line in the supply chain with this compliance so that it is easy to align? So is there a deliberate action from the EU for them, even as they raise the standards, to ensure that the margins made by those in the supply chains are sufficient for them to be able to implement the compliance guidelines?
So mine is to thank you. Let's continue to do this engagement. Let's continue to learn from one another, and let's continue to build an environment that will ensure that the people that enjoy our products are happy with what we do as a business. So thank you, and thanks for Global Compact, and thanks to the PHR Africa project team, to the team from DOJ who has left. We are thankful for them to be enable this happening. Thank you very much, and God bless you as you go.